the stench hit me first, before the cacophony of honking and human cries. A thick, cloying sweetness, like overripe mangoes left to rot in the summer sun, mixed with something metallic, something acridly human. This was the Mumbai I knew, the city's underbelly exposed, raw and festering in the humid night. It was a smell that clung to your skin, wormed its way into your nostrils, and reminded you that beneath the glitter and glass towers, this city was a beast, hungry and perpetually unsatisfied. My name is Rohan Verma, and I've spent the last 15 years of my life chasing shadows in this city. Not the glamorous kind that dance across Bollywood screens, but the real ones that lurk in the chawls, the back alleys, the forgotten corners where the city tries to bury its sins. I'm a journalist, or what's left of one. Used to be with a national daily, bright-eyed, idealistic, wanting to expose truth and change the world. Now I freelance for a rag that barely pays the bills, writing about petty crimes and political scandals that everyone already knows about but pretends to be shocked by. The idealism, like the hope, had been leached out of me a long time ago. It started on July 11th, 2006. The train bombings. I lost my wife, Priya, that day. She was coming home from work, a schoolteacher with a smile that could melt ice and a heart too big for this cruel world. The blast ripped her apart, along with hundreds of others. In the aftermath, amidst the chaos and the collective grief, I found myself adrift, anchorless in a sea of despair. The city mourned, politicians postured, and life, brutally, went on. But for me, something inside had snapped. The vibrant colors of life faded to monochrome. I threw myself into my work, chasing stories, any story that could distract me from the gaping hole Priya had left behind. But instead of finding solace, I found only darkness. I saw the city's rot up close, the casual cruelty, the rampant corruption, the insatiable greed that fueled the engine of this metropolis. Tonight, the rot was particularly pungent. I was tailing Inspector Vikram Rathore, a name whispered in hushed tones in the police circles and fearfully in the slums. Rathore was a man carved from granite and cynicism, with eyes that held the cold glint of steel and a reputation that preceded him like a shroud. He was known for getting results, whatever the cost. And the cost, everyone knew, was usually paid in flesh and blood, often of the innocent. My editor, a jaded old goat named Shyamaji, had given me a vague tip, whispers of unusual disappearances around Kamathipura, the city's oldest red light district. Something more than just runaways, Rohan. Shyamaji had grunted, his teeth stained nicotine yellow. Something rotten. Rathore's sniffing around. See what you can dig up. Kamathipura at night was a sensory assault. The neon signs pulsed like diseased hearts, casting lurid colors on the narrow lanes teeming with women, their faces etched with a weary resignation that belied the forced smiles they offered. The air was thick with cheap perfume, desperation, and the ever-present stench of the city. I kept a discreet distance. Rathore was no fool. He'd smell a reporter a mile away. He stopped in front of a dilapidated building, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, its windows dark and lifeless. A sign above the entrance, barely legible, read, Shanti Nivas Guest House. Shanti Nivas, Peace Residence. A cruel joke in this den of vice. Rathore vanished inside, his broad shoulders swallowing the doorway. I waited, the clammy Mumbai air sticking to my skin. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sounds of the city, the blare of traffic, the distant chants from a temple, the low hum of the city's ceaseless activity seemed to fade, replaced by a strange, oppressive silence that settled over Shanti Nivas. It wasn't just the usual nighttime quiet. It was a silence pregnant with something unspoken, something unsettling. Then a scream pierced the silence. A woman's scream, raw and terrified, cut short as if someone had clamped a hand over her mouth. My heart hammered against my ribs. I hesitated. Rathor was inside. Confronting him would be suicide. But the scream. It echoed Priya's scream in my nightmares, the scream I never actually heard, but knew in the cold, stark reality of loss. Driven by a sudden, reckless impulse, I pushed open the creaking door of Shanti Nivas and stepped inside. The air inside was even heavier, thick with the same sickeningly sweet smell from outside, intensified here to a nauseating degree. The lobby was deserted, lit by a single flickering bulb that cast long, dancing shadows. Dust motes hung heavy in the stagnant air. There was a dampness, a clamminess to the walls, as if the building itself was sweating. The scream had come from upstairs. I moved towards the staircase, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Each step was a betrayal, announcing my presence in this den of shadows. As I climbed, the smell grew stronger, now laced with something else. Something animalistic. A primal musk that triggered a deep, instinctive revulsion. On the first floor landing, a door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled from the crack, a sickly yellow glow that seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic beat. The sounds emanating from within were muffled, indistinct. Low moans, soft whimpers, and a guttural voice, too low to decipher words, but filled with an undercurrent of cruel pleasure. I pushed the door open further. The scene inside made my blood run cold, a cold that had nothing to do with the Mumbai humidity. Vikram Rathor stood in the center of the room, bathed in the sickly yellow light of a cheap bedside lamp. He was naked from the waist up, his powerful torso glistening with sweat. His eyes were closed, his face contorted in an expression that was a grotesque parody of ecstasy. But it was what he held in his arms that froze me to the spot. It was a woman, naked, pale as death, her body limp and contorted at an unnatural angle. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling, but they were vacant, devoid of life. Her skin was shimmering, not with sweat, but with a strange, ethereal luminescence. The sweet, flowing smell emanated from her, intensified, almost overwhelming in the small room. But it wasn't just her death that was horrifying. It was the way Rathor held her. Not like a lover, but like someone possessed. His hands were buried in her hair, his face pressed against her neck, and he was inhaling deep, shuddering breaths as if he was drawing something tangible from her lifeless form. And then he opened his eyes. They were no longer the cold steel I remembered. They burned with a feverish, unnatural light, a lust that went beyond the physical, beyond the human. He looked at me, and a slow, predatory smile stretched across his face. "Rohan," he breathed, his voice thick, almost slurred, but laced with a terrifying familiarity. "You shouldn't have come." He didn't move, didn't seem surprised to see me. He just stood there, cradling the dead woman, his eyes fixed on me with that unnerving, hungry light. "Rathor," I managed to croak, my voice trembling despite myself. What is this?" He chuckled, a low, rattling sound that echoed in the stillness of the room. "This, Rohan, is the answer to everything, all the emptiness, all the pain. This." He tightened his grip on the woman, his voice laced with a deranged adoration. is pure ecstasy. He moved then, slowly, deliberately, stepping towards me, still holding the woman's corpse in his arms. As he moved, the sickly sweet smell intensified, becoming almost suffocating. I staggered back, repulsed, terrified, not just by the sight of the dead woman, but by something else. Something invisible, hanging in the air, something malevolent and ancient. You feel it too, don't you, Rohan? Rathor's voice dripped with a perverse intimacy. The hunger, the longing. We all have it. We all crave something more. And she provides. He gestured to the dead woman with a sickening tenderness. I wanted to run, to scream, to get out of that room, out of that building, out of this nightmare. But my feet were rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a fear that transcended the rational. I could feel something tugging at me too, a dark, insidious curiosity, a whisper of temptation that promised oblivion from the pain, from the loss, from the endless, grinding despair of my life. Priya, I whispered, her name escaping my lips unbidden. The raw ache of her loss, always present beneath the surface, surged up, overwhelming me. Rathor stopped, his smile widening, now predatory, knowing. Priya. Loss. The greatest hunger of all, isn't it? And she feeds on it. He tilted the woman's head back, revealing her face more fully. In the dim yellow light, I could see her features. They were young, heartbreakingly so. But it was her eyes, still wide open, still vacant, that held a different kind of horror now. They weren't just empty. They were hollow. As if something had been sucked out, leaving behind nothing but a shell. And then I saw it. Just a flicker at first in the corner of my vision. A faint shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt, but darker. It was around Rathor, surrounding him like a shroud, clinging to him and the dead woman in his arms. It pulsed, throbbed, with a life of its own. And as I watched, the shimmer intensified, coalescing, taking shape. It began to look like smoke, dark and viscous, swirling around Rathor, writhing tendrils reaching out, caressing his skin, merging with him. And as it solidified, as it took form, I saw what it truly was. It wasn't smoke, it was shadow. Not just any shadow, but a shadow with substance, a shadow with will, a shadow. Feeding. It was feeding on Rathor, feeding on the dead woman, feeding on the lust and despair that permeated the room. And it was growing stronger. Rathor's eyes were glazed over now, pupils dilated, lost in whatever dark ecstasy this entity was providing. He was no longer Inspector Vikram Rathor, the ruthless, corrupt cop. He was just a vessel, a conduit for something ancient, something monstrous. And then, the twist. The horrifying, gut-wrenching twist that made everything click into place, not with understanding, but with a chilling, terrifying realization. As the shadow solidified further, taking on a more defined form, I saw it. I saw a resemblance, faint, fleeting, but undeniably there. In the shape of the head, the curve of the cheekbone, the almost familiar angle of the neck. The shadow. It was starting to look like Priya. My Priya. The woman I lost. The loss that had hollowed me out, left me a shell of a man, wandering the shadows of this city. The loss that Rathor had spoken of. The hunger. The craving. It wasn't the dead woman Rathor was holding. It was the shadow of my grief. The manifestation of my unending sorrow, twisted, corrupted, feeding on the city's lust and despair, using Rathor as its puppet. And it was using Priya's image, my beloved Priya, as bait, luring me in, drawing me closer to the abyss, promising solace, promising release from pain in exchange for what? My soul? My sanity? The shadow in Priya's shape turned its head towards me, and in its vacant, lightless eyes, I saw not Priya, but the abyss staring back, and in that abyss, I saw the true face of lust. Not just the physical craving, but the deeper, darker lust for oblivion, the yearning for escape from the unbearable weight of loss. A lust that could consume everything, leaving behind nothing but shadows and the stench of decay. I ran. I ran as if hell itself was on my heels, the cloying sweetness of the shadow clinging to my skin, the image of Priya's corrupted form burned into my eyes. I ran from Shantinivas, from Kamatipura, from the horrifying truth I had glimpsed. I ran back into the chaotic, unforgiving embrace of Mumbai, the city of dreams and nightmares, forever haunted by the shadow of lust and the ghost of my own grief. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the city, and perhaps even I, was forever changed by what I had witnessed in that room. The beast was not just in the shadows, it was within us, feeding on our deepest wounds, our darkest desires, waiting for the right moment to consume us whole.